Alex woke with a jolt. White walls, a sterile smell, the steady beep of a machine. The hospital. His head throbbed, a dull ache behind his eyes. Where was he? Why was he here? He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced him back. He was restrained. An IV drip connected to his arm. Disoriented and afraid, he looked around the room. Empty, except for him. A shiver ran down his spine. Something wasn't right. The air felt heavy, charged with an unseen energy. He was being watched. A figure then emerged from the shadows. A woman, tall and slender, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to bore into his soul. She wore a doctor's coat, her name tag reading Dr. E. Harper. A warm smile played on her lips, but her eyes remained cold, calculating. "You're awake?" she said, her voice smooth as silk. "How are you feeling?" Alex wanted to answer, to ask what was happening, but fear choked his words. He could only stare back, trapped in the chilling gaze of Dr. Harper. Days turned into nights. Alex remained a prisoner in the sterile confines of his room. His memories were hazy, fragments of a night he couldn't piece together. He remembered a searing pain in his neck, then darkness. Dr. Harper visited him daily, her presence both comforting and unsettling. She spoke softly, reassuringly, but her touch sent shivers down his spine. Her fingers were icy cold, her grip surprisingly strong. He overheard the nurses whispering, calling her the Angel of Mercy. But Alex felt a growing unease. There was something about Dr. Harper, something hidden beneath her perfect facade. The hospital itself added to his unease. It was eerily quiet, devoid of the usual bustle and chatter. The few patients he saw were pale and gaunt, their eyes hollow and filled with a strange fear. He never saw them leave. And then there were the nurses. They moved with an unnatural grace, their skin unnaturally pale, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. They never spoke unless spoken to, their smiles strained, their gazes lingering too long. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was trapped in a nightmare, surrounded by something sinister. One night, as Alex lay in the darkness, he heard voices. They were coming from the hallway, hushed whispers that sent chills down his spine. He strained to listen. It was Nurse Thompson, her voice tight with fear. "We need more blood," she hissed. "The new patient is draining us dry." A deep, raspy voice replied, "Patience, sister, he will be ready soon enough." Alex's blood ran cold. What did they mean, draining us dry? What were they planning? He had to escape, had to get help. He waited until the hallway was empty, then swung his legs over the side of the bed. He was weaker than he thought, dizziness washing over him. He clung to the IV stand, his legs shaking. He had to get out. He had to warn someone. Days bled into one another, each one a torment of whispered conversations, strange smells, and the constant, unsettling presence of Dr. Harper. Alex began to notice patterns. The staff only seemed to work at night, emerging from the shadows like phantoms. The patients, always few and far between, were invariably admitted with strange wounds, deep punctures on their necks that defied explanation. And then there was the aversion to sunlight. The hospital was perpetually shrouded in darkness, heavy curtains drawn even during the day. The staff, if they had to venture outside, did so with their faces covered, their bodies swathed in thick clothing. He remembered the hushed conversation he'd overheard, the fear in Nurse Thompson's voice, the cryptic words about needing more blood. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a terrifying picture that chilled him to the bone. The hospital, the staff, Dr. Harper, they were all hiding a dark secret, a secret that whispered of ancient legends, of creatures of the night, vampires. One evening, Dr. Harper entered his room with her usual serene smile. "How are you feeling, Alex?" she asked, her voice a soothing balm. But Alex was no longer fooled. He had seen the truth in her eyes, a flicker of something predatory, something inhuman. "What are you?" he choked out, his voice hoarse with fear. Dr. Harper's smile faltered, replaced by a cold, calculating look. She leaned closer, her breath warm on his skin. "What do you think I am, Alex?" she whispered, her voice a husky murmur. He saw it then in the dim light, a flash of something sharp and white behind her perfect teeth. Fangs. Her eyes, once warm and inviting, now glowed with an eerie red light. The truth hit him like a physical blow. She was a monster, a vampire. Panic surged through Alex, a primal fear gripping his heart. He scrambled back against the headboard, his eyes wide with terror. "Stay away from me!" he shouted, his voice cracking. But Dr. Harper only smiled, a slow, predatory grin that sent shivers down his spine. "There's nowhere to run, Alex," she purred. "You're one of us now." He knew she was right. He was trapped at the mercy of a monster, but he couldn't give up, couldn't let her win. He had to escape, even if it killed him. Mustering all his strength, he threw himself against the door. It wouldn't budge, it was locked. He hammered his fists against the metal, a desperate primal scream escaping his lips. "Help! Someone help me!" he cried, his voice echoing in the silent hallway. But he knew it was futile. No one could hear him. He was alone. The door creaked open, revealing Nurse Thompson. "What's all this commotion?" she snapped, her eyes narrowed. But her words were cut short as she caught sight of Alex, his face contorted in terror. "He knows," he gasped, pointing a trembling finger at Dr. Harper. The nurse's eyes widened in understanding, then a chilling smile spread across her lips. "So he does," she murmured, her voice devoid of emotion. "And now he must be dealt with." Alex recoiled in horror. Her features seemed to shift, her skin growing paler, her eyes taking on an unnatural gleam. He saw it then, in the dim light, the telltale glint of fangs. She was one of them, another monster wearing a human mask. "There's no escape, Alex," Nurse Thompson hissed, her voice a low growl. "You've seen too much." She lunged at him, her movements inhumanly fast. Alex barely had time to flinch before she was upon him, pinning him to the bed with surprising strength. He struggled against her grip, but it was like fighting a creature possessed. "Let me go!" he choked out, his words muffled by her hand clamped over his mouth. He thrashed and kicked, desperation lending him a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength. But it was no use. He was outnumbered, outmatched, and utterly at their mercy. Terror choked him, the realization of his helplessness washing over him like an icy wave. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own nightmare. And the worst part, he knew what awaited him. He had seen the hunger in their eyes, the insatiable thirst that pulsed beneath their perfect facades. He was going to become one of them. Dr. Harper approached the bed, her eyes gleaming with an unholy light. "Don't fight it, Alex," she whispered, her voice a seductive purr. "Embrace the darkness. Become one of us." Her cold, pale hand reached for his face, her touch sending a jolt of fear through his body. He closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face, and surrendered to the inevitable. In the cold, sterile silence of the hospital room, another soul was lost to the night. The feast had begun.